Randy Liebeck has been dabbling in the world of spontaneous phenomena research and field investigations since the 1980s. He's a USA-based member of ASSAP, the SPR, and the Ghost Club, and has an extensive background as a law enforcement officer and investigator at state and federal level. He currently serves in a national security and threat management capacity for the US government. Absolutely fascinating. And he's given us a little bit of a description about the talk here. So it's about a benign long-term multi-house haunting in Dutchess County in New York that suddenly becomes dark and frightening, crossing over into what most researchers would consider poltergeist territory. Randy discusses one of his most intriguing cases and ponders the question of whether a pre-existing haunt can morph into or energize a poltergeist outbreak. That sounds absolutely wonderful. So please put your questions at the bottom. Enjoy the webinar. Randy, over to you. Thank you.
Outstanding. Beacon, New York is a city in Dutchess County, New York. It is about 60 miles north of New York City. You can see on the map, I am in New Jersey, in central New Jersey. At the time of this investigation, I was in the city of Paterson, New Jersey. So Beacon, New York is just due north of me, past and through New York City. Dutchess County and the city of Beacon, back when this case kicked off, which was in 1996, summer, early fall. Beacon was an industrial city in New York that hit hard times. 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, Beacon had lots of factories, lots of businesses. By the 80s into the 90s, the city had a downturn and was having its troubles, which a lot of cities, formerly industrial cities in the US were going through at the time. I am happy to say that today things have turned around in Beacon. There's been a renaissance, and the town is now an artist's haven with all kinds of artist communities and creative artists, shops and displays. So it is going through a resurgence. It's becoming Dutchess County's Greenwich Village. Here's a couple of screenshots of Beacon, New York, waterfront town. There are areas of it which are old residential with houses built back in the 1800s. And then factories which were dilapidated for a long time, which are now being repurposed for other uses, including residences. Beacon itself has a long-term historical folklore in New York history. The town Beacon is named because during the Revolutionary War in the 1700s, the locals used to fire up warning lights, beacon lights on top of Beacon Mountain to warn the Continental Army that the naughty British were approaching. So that's where the name comes from. There's a historical record of hauntings in the town and the surrounding areas. There is a island, I believe in that bay you see on the left of the screen, called Bannerman Island, and the island and a castle-like structure on the island have been reported to be haunted for a long time. Like most locations, any town, any state, any country, they're going to have your local legends of hauntings. Summer, early fall 1996, I received a phone call from this woman, Julie C. We'll go with the initial for the last name. Julie had been encountering some unusual phenomena in her house in Beacon. Julie had moved into the house, again, built in the 1800s, in around 1985. As she was remodeling the house and setting it up to the way she wanted it, she and her family, her husband, her parents, her children, were encountering what we would consider to be uh, low to moderate level haunting activity. Uh, they would find, well, first, the first thing that happened is she would hear the voice of what she can describe as a little girl's voice crying, wandering around saying, "Help me, where's my mommy?" And she heard it, family members heard it, and this was going on for quite a long time. Nothing was considered to be frightening about it, other than the initial response to any of us hearing a voice when there's nothing there. But she did not pick up any negative or frightening vibes. Uh, Other items, she liked to listen to modern rock and roll music on her radio. She as she would listen to the music, the station would change, and it would go to easy listening light pop music. She would go to the radio, change it back to her preferred station of rock and roll music, and it would change again. She began observing that the dial, the manual dial on the radio, was physically turning. So it was not purely an electronic phenomenon. There was physical kinetic manipulation of the dial. There was a period of time when she was refinishing the wooden floor in the house. And she went out, left the house with her husband, came back later in the day to allow the varnish to dry. And when she came home, there were footprints, bare footprints embedded in the varnish on the wooden surface. Husband, of course, has a fit, some neighborhood kid snuck into the house and walked around. The size of the footprints indicated a small child. Julie, in her mind, connected that with the voice of a little girl that she was hearing. A few years passed. Julie had her first child. Child was in a crib in the nursery, and Julie began noticing that she would put the child in the crib, raise up the side slats, which prevent the baby from falling out of the crib. When she would return to the nursery, the slats were down. She would examine that. There was no reason for it. There was no malfunction. You have to manually, significantly manipulate the rails to lower them. But every time she would raise the rails and lock them in place, when she would return to the room, the rails were down. This was a bit concerning because the baby could fall out of the crib. Again, Julie connected this with what she thought was the ghost of a little girl who was resident in her house. Again, nothing she was afraid of, but now she's becoming a bit concerned that the little girl's ghost might inadvertently hurt the baby. Julie began talking to her neighbors in the neighborhood and found out that she was not the only person in the neighborhood who'd experienced unusual phenomena. There had been a local legend in that neighborhood in Beacon, and I do not want to give the exact location or the street names, but this is an aerial shot of the neighborhood. These are the houses that were involved in the haunting. Obviously, more than Julie's house was involved. The neighbors had also heard the voice of a little girl wandering around saying, "Help me, I'm lost, where's my mommy?" We located, after I got involved in the investigation, we located one of the neighbors in one of these houses who was in her late 80s at the time. And she remembered when she was a little girl growing up in the neighborhood. As a little girl, she had heard stories of the wandering ghost of a little girl. And she had heard that back when she was a child, so we're talking maybe 1910s, 1920s in that time period, that there was a story that the little girl had fallen down an open well in the backyard of one of these houses, and that it was her ghost that was haunting the neighborhood, wandering around trying to find its mother. After I got involved in the case, I and other researchers I was working with tried to track down if there was a historical validity to that report. We did find one of the houses with a well in the backyard. However, there were no reports that we could track down of the little girl falling down the well and dying. So whether that is an actual historical event that is just not recorded in official records, because we're talking about a long time ago, and records back then are not the state of the art that they are today, or it might just be local folklore, possibly as an attempt to try to explain what could be behind the haunting, which is a normal human reaction to these kinds of things. But this is the house. It involves houses on two separate streets. You see the intersection here at the bottom of your screen. The houses that were involved, which were at least 4, possibly 5, that I was able to get residents to discuss the case. Others would close the door in my face and the face of my colleagues. But it was houses along those 2 streets. And again, the reports of the haunting going back apparently at least until the early 20th century. This is house number 1. This is Julie C.'s house, the person who contacted me. Now, she had been experiencing these things, and for about 10 years, 85, she moved in. Little girl, apparently didn't like rock music, was lost looking for its mother, endangered the baby, possibly to a degree. But Julie sat down and said, hey, little girl, I know you just want to play with the baby. I know you're not meaning any harm, but by leaving the slats of the crib down, you could endanger the baby. So please don't, mess with the baby. After Julie had that conversation with something that may or may not have been there, the bed slats stopped coming down. So that problem was resolved. Over a period of about 10 years, the issues with hearing the little girl's voice, the radio changing channels, and feeling the presence. Julie said, and not just Julie, her parents, who also lived in the house upstairs, also reported they sensed, didn't see, but just felt. They knew that there was a little girl in the house. This house is built in the 1800s. And this house is located on the corner of the where those 2 streets intersect. Now, Julie reported, again, early fall 1996, that the town started digging up the street in front of the house, down the entire length of one of these cross streets, to replace the sewer line, which was degenerating. According to Julie, after that major road construction began, the haunting dynamics took a shift. The first thing she noticed, this little girl who was just wandering around looking for her mother and saying, help me, help me. When Julie heard the voice, the ghost, and we'll say that for the lack of a better term right now, seemed to be frightened. There was a sense of fear. The help me no longer seemed to be connected with finding her mother. It seemed to be an actual fear. And Julie began sensing the presence of someone or something else in the house, began seeing dark fleeting shadows in the room. And she sensed what she picked up and reported as a male presence, something nasty, something hostile. When this activity started beginning, she became concerned. Something else was going on. One of the things that happened while she was in the house, when again she varnished the wooden floors, and they went out, they found the footprints of what she said was a little girl in the house. This is a recreation of that. I was not around when this happened in the 80s. So this is not an original photograph. We have the radio type of dial illustration of a crib situation. Road work began, and other things began happening. Julie was concerned, became interested at this point in paranormal phenomena, wanted to research ghosts, hauntings, to try to see what was up. She visited a bookstore. I believe it was a Barnes and Noble bookstore, but I'm not going to swear to that. While she was looking through the occult and New Age section at the bookstore, she said something or someone physically pushed her, threw her into the bookshelves. She fell into them. All the books were knocked off the shelf. Of course, she immediately turned around. There was no one there, no one in the vicinity. but she felt something, what she said felt like human hands, pushed her and knocked her over. Glassware in the house began shattering in the kitchen and the dining room. Glasses, both with liquid in them and just dry, sitting on the sink, would begin to explode, putting glass shards throughout the kitchen and dining room, again endangering her child. And by this time, she had another child. This is around 1995 into 96. This began with the road construction. Again, a different turn of events from the benign little girl looking for her mother. There's a stairwell going down to the basement and a stairwell going up to the higher floors. But the one to the basement, her dog used to routinely hang out in the basement, run downstairs, play, come back upstairs. When this shift in the tone of the haunting began, the dog would refuse from that moment on to go into the basement. And the dog would stand at the top of the stairs, just staring down and barking uncontrollably. So the dog seemed to be sensing something in the environment also. Julie, again, talked with her neighbors, who most of them, at least 4 or 5 households confirmed that similar activity is going on at her house. Initially, the little girl's haunting, the benign haunting, which may have been a place memory situation, because there was no direct interaction between the witnesses, or no communication between the witnesses and the little girl. However, the manipulation of the crib, the manipulation of the radio knob, seems to indicate it was a bit more than a place memory, whether or not it was a surviving human consciousness, and the implications that brings up. Can surviving human consciousness without a body actually manipulate a radio dial or move a crib slat? And there are competing ideas on that. One of the neighbors across the street and 3 houses down was Stephanie K, we go off the last initial. This was her house, house number 2, again, built in the 1800s. Steph had moved into her house a little bit before Julie did, I believe, around 1984, with her husband and her child, Amanda. When they moved in, they had immediately begun noticing the ghost of a little girl in the neighborhood. They had not discussed it with their neighbors, so they did not know that Julie had been experiencing this. Julie soon found out that definitely Steph was. Some of the things that Stephanie experienced in the house, and that her child, Amanda, did. Again, we're talking late 80s, early 90s. Amanda, the kid, said she was in her room. She had an electric typewriter that she used for schoolwork. One day she noticed the electric typewriter began just typing on its own, very fast, very frantically, which understandably freaked her out. She pulled the plug of the typewriter. She reports the typewriter continued typing with power going through it, uncontrollably, until she left the room scared to death. As she was leaving the room, she noticed there's a wastebasket in the room full of her schoolwork, paperwork. The papers in the wastebasket began fluttering and flying out of the garbage can and floating around the room. Again, terrified, ran out of the house. She had also reported sensing the presence and hearing the little girl, just like her mother had reported. And in Amanda's bedroom, and I'm pretty sure this is a photo, it was in my file photos from the case, and I'm pretty sure this is Amanda's bedroom. She reported seeing the visual apparition of a little girl's face in the window, and she heard audibly the girl going, "Help me, help me, help me." Now, first thought would be, okay, maybe there was a local neighborhood young girl standing there looking in the window and saying this for some reason. However, the elevation of the window is at a height where a person standing on the ground could not be visible. Certainly their face would not be visible outside that window. So Amanda had the impression that this little girl was hovering or floating outside the window. And back in the 80s, Amanda was about 6 years old. Uh, at this time, her mother, Steph's husband, was living there. They since became divorced. The husband was digging out the floor in the basement. There's a concrete floor. Husband wanted to turn that basement into another room, more living space. And he had to dig into the floor to make it lower because the ceiling wasn't high enough. So he started doing construction work in the basement, started digging the hole. According to Amanda, the father found the skeletal hand of what she interpreted as a human hand. Her father got very upset by that, took the skeleton hand, went out to the backyard and threw it as hard as he could into the bushes and tree line behind the house. Now, interesting story. She told it to her mother. Her mother, Steph, believed the story. Not long after, the husband refused to enter the basement, apparently never went back down there, and left, abandoned the family, and there was a divorce. Interesting story. Was there a human hand buried under the concrete in the basement? Unfortunately, all we have to go on are the recollections of a girl who was between 6 and 8 years old at the time. So that could be problematic. I'm not going to rule out the veracity of that story, but we do have to remember the source of it. Julie on the left and Steph on the right became very good friends because they were having shared experiences. Julie's husband also left, and there was eventually a divorce. So they had a lot of shared things to talk about, including experiencing haunting phenomena. And in both cases, physical phenomena, which seems to be taking things up a notch or two from certainly a place memory or residual haunting, and perhaps even up a notch or two from what we consider to be an apparitional or surviving human consciousness haunting. So they became good friends, began hanging out. What Julie noticed or suspected, and what I determined to be an absolute fact from interviewing her and Stephanie when I got involved, was that the activity always kicked up a few notches when the two of them were together at either of their two houses. They would be present, and that's when physical frightening stuff would happen. The two of them, I think, largely because of their experiences over many years living in haunted houses, got an interest in the paranormal and the occult. And they got into a kick of doing tarot card readings with each other, sometimes at Steph's house, sometimes at Julie's house. When they would do tarot card readings, reportedly the phenomena really kicked off. And they would invite other people and friends and relatives to stop by for these tarot card readings. And I interviewed family members, including Julie's mother. There was a family friend or a relative, I don't recall right now, but she was a nurse, and she reported, yes, this stuff actually happened. When Julie and Steph would begin playing tarot cards, there would be a noticeable temperature drop in the immediate vicinity to the point where it would be summer in August. Tarot cards would be playing a chill enough to make your hair stand up on your arms would envelop the area, and people would start hearing noises. Also, the activity had morphed more and more over this 10-year period into a more poltergeistic activity. Doors in both houses would open and close. They've been opening and closing for a few years, but when Steph and Julie would begin doing tarot card readings, doors would slam violently, open, slam shut with violence. When the temperature would rise back up to normal conditions, the physical phenomena seemed to stop. So at this point in the story, from interviewing them, I am picking up some thoughts in my head about what might be an element, at least one element of what's going on in the totality of circumstances here. Late summer, early fall 1996, I get a phone call from Julie C. who now decides that, things are escalating to the point where she needs to get some outside help. She had reached out to a couple of sources. I believe she reached out to a university. I want to say Cornell University in New York, because I was on their referral list for people reporting stuff like this, but I'm not sure. I believe she mentioned she reached out to Lloyd Auerbach, who is a parapsychologist in California, and that she said Lloyd told her to contact me since I was a lot closer. Lloyd could not get out to New York, even though Lloyd had family in Westchester County, New York. So I received the phone call. She is telling me the story of what was going on, all the things I've related to you. And so I'm trying to give an initial consultation over the phone and try to figure out, is this worth my time? And if so, to what degree? A lot of these reports I've gotten, can be dealt with by giving advice over the phone and do not require an actual on-site investigation. So she's telling me the stories and how she gets frightened sometimes, and she's worried about her child, and now she had more than one child by this point. So I decided to give her some advice along the lines of her talking to the what she thought was a little girl's ghost, saying, "Hey, you can hang out, you can play, you can if you want to look at the baby, that's fine, but don't mess with the slats and the crib." I was giving her similar advice. I pointed out that in some cases where if in a haunting situation where if the activity is a bit unnerving or keeps somebody up late at night and the people can't sleep because of the noises, I suggested talking, addressing what you think might be there, putting down some ground rules, saying, "Hey, don't scare the kids. Don't open and slam the doors, after 9 o'clock at night because they're trying to sleep." Every time I gave her a piece of concrete advice on how to mitigate the phenomena she was experiencing, a loud roaring static would come over the phone, drowning out the conversation. When I would just be listening to her or discussing the possibilities and giving her a rundown of some of the general models we have for this kind of stuff without going into too much detail, because I did not want to put any thoughts into her head which would cause her to modify her reports in an attempt to please me or say what she thought I wanted to hear. So I gave her some very generic historical ideas of the difference between apparitional hauntings, the surviving consciousness, and place memory concepts. So I was having general conversation, talk like that, perfectly crystal clear conversation. The moment I would say, "Hey, here's something you can try. This works in some cases," loud roaring static drowned out the conversation. The timing was not coincidental. The loud static was in definite response to what I was saying. Now, I was hearing loud, roaring, electronic sounding static. Julie said that's not what she heard. She heard during the same moments a loud, gruff male voice telling her, I want to modify my language here, but telling her in not very polite terms to go screw herself, and making other comments about her family, her baby, her house. I was hearing static. She was hearing hostile, threatening, profane male voice. What she said, she knew it was not me. It was not anything remotely similar to my voice. At this point, I am intrigued. This case does interest me enough to continue to follow up. This type of phone interference did not happen again. There was this one time, one day, and it happened 5, 6, 7 times during the conversation in response specifically to what I was saying, apparently trying to prevent her from hearing the suggestions I was giving. So I decide I'm going to go out there and visit her one day. So a couple of weeks had passed since this phone call. I hop on the New York Thruway heading up to Beacon. That's the car. That is my old Pontiac Sunbird that I was driving. Not the fanciest, most state-of-the-art car, but there had never been any mechanical problems whatsoever with this car. I'm driving up to Beacon. I'm just getting off the Garden State Parkway in New Jersey. We cross over into New York State on the New York Thruway. The car starts sputtering. I'm pressing the gas pedal to accelerate. There's no acceleration. The car is in the process of dying. So, okay, I don't want to get stuck on the New York Thruway. From the picture on the left of the Thruway, you can see why I did not want to get stuck there. So I get off on the next exit, car, still sputtering, no power behind it. Get off at the exit, turn around, start heading back to New Jersey. As soon as I'm heading in the direction of New Jersey again, car is working perfectly. Problems over with. No sign that there was any problem whatsoever. Okay, interesting. Stuff happens. Cars have mechanical issues. So I made a judgment call. Everything seemed fine now with the car. Maybe just some weird one-off thing. I turned around again, heading back to Beacon, New York. Almost as soon as I am heading back to New York on the Thruway, the exact same thing started happening. Car sputtering, no acceleration. I said, okay, that's it. Something bad's happening with the car. I cannot continue with this. I turn around, head back to Jersey. As soon as I turn around, and my intent is not to go to Beacon, New York, but to go back home, car works perfectly. The car never had a malfunction like that again. And it was a significant malfunction. Something was going on with the powertrain or the transmission, but it never happened again. Let a few days pass. I said, okay, I'm going to try it once again, because now it seems to me, and I did not voice this to Julie, but it seemed to me that something, both from the phone conversation and from the auto issues, that something was aware that I wanted to head out there and investigate this, and something wanted to interfere with that. Now, was it a ghost or some discarnate entity, or was Julie knew I was heading out there? So that's another factor. How much was Julie involved in this? Again, still paranormal wise, but maybe or maybe not a ghost. Some of the things that Julie reported in the house, additionally, with the kinetic movement of objects, she had a little bird feeder, which you see in this picture. And the bird feeder had a little figurine of St. Francis of Assisi in the middle of it. She decided she was going to cleanse her house of negative influences by turning the bird feeder into a impromptu incense burner. So she hung it from the ceiling in her house, would put white votive candles in it, pour holy water that she had obtained from a monastery that was in the neighborhood, and would burn white sage in it. All things that she had read during her research on strange phenomena that indicated that, hey, maybe these things could help, or at least some people believe these things can help. She indicated that when she would start doing her little impromptu ceremony, the bird feeder / incense burner would begin spinning and rotating in both directions. It would just begin spinning in a wide arc in one direction, come to a stop, not winding down, not with the energy dissipating after it had been doing circular arcs. It would come to a dead stop, like something grabbed it and held it, and then start reversing in the other direction. And this was witnessed by several neighborhood witnesses that I talked to, including the family members and neighbors. This photograph was taken from one of my visits there. That's the guy there is one of my investigators I worked with. And he had reported at this moment that he felt a static electrical tingling sensation up near the incense burner when he would put his fingers there. I did not detect that. He said he did, and he is a credible investigator with integrity, so I believe he felt what he said he felt. I utilized various environmental detection devices, electrostatic detectors, tri-field meter for electromagnetic and electrical energy. Took images of it on a camera and with infrared. Nothing anomalous. No indications of any strange environmental energy readings. So nothing happened during this visit. Something did happen another time when I was there. Go back. On a later visit, I and a couple of investigators I worked with occasionally on haunting and poltergeist cases from a New Jersey group called Vestigia. Vestigia had been around since the 1970s, had done a lot of groundbreaking research on spook lights or ghost lights, and we're one of the first investigative units to get infrared photographs of these ghost lights, which were in near where I live in New Jersey. There's an abandoned railroad track, and these lights would be seen to form and follow the rails along the railroad track. And Vestigia, in consultation at the time with Dr. Michael Persinger in Canada, determined from observation and from the photographs that this was a plasma formation, not a ghost, not anything paranormal, just a not completely understood natural geophysical phenomena. But Vestigia had a background in doing some hard science research when investigating the paranormal. Team leader was a guy named Peter Jordan. I've worked with on several cases. So I, Peter, and a couple other members of the Vestigia group went back to Julie's house one day. Julie left the house, left us alone. There was no one in the house that day except myself and my co-investigators. While we are setting up some surveillance equipment in the house to see if anything unusual happened, I noticed the incense burning start to rotate, slowly at first, then faster, in an ever increasing arc, indicating that the energy expenditure was increasing rather than somebody had pushed it and it was slowly slowing down as the energy decayed. Something was applying force to this to make it move around. I called one of the investigators over, John Birkenbush, and said, "John, this damn thing is moving." He saw it moving. He immediately thought I had taken it and pushed it to make it move to play a game with him. I assured him I did not. As we watched it, it came to a dead stop after the arc kept getting wider and wider and wider, which again, in my layman's view of the world, that does not seem to comply with the laws of physics. But we saw it getting wider and wider and wider. It came to a standstill stop and started spinning in the other direction. Now we're really intrigued. Now we're focusing cameras, video, environmental detection devices at this, and it did not happen again. We tried to recreate it. Went upstairs, started walking on the floor directly above where it was, stomping, closing doors. The windows were closed. There was no breeze. We could not recreate it. We could not do anything to make it move. Now there are streets, outside the house. There was at the time still construction going on to repair and replace the sewer line. It was that repair work went on a significant distance down the street. So we could not rule out the possibility that even though we could not make this thing budge by stomping around the house, that maybe some sort of vibration was being transmitted through the ground. When a truck went down a certain road at a certain speed, or maybe the road crew was doing something that sent vibrations. So we could not rule that out. But the movement of this incense burner was such that it really struck me as anomalous, or I could never figure out how it was moving like that. Of course, once we had the video cameras trained on it, it stopped doing it. I got a call one night around 2-3 a.m. from Julie, who was in a panic, who told me, "I need you to get out here now. One of my child's toy car is chasing me around the house. I'm locked in my bedroom and the car is trying to get in." And I hear over the telephone, bam, 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 and the whir of an electric motor, and bam, 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 bam. What she said was the car outside her bedroom door slamming into it, trying to get through. And she was terrified. I could not get there at 3 o'clock in the morning, but not the next morning, but later that morning before lunchtime, I was able to get a hold of a couple of my colleagues. We headed out to Beacon. She said after she talked to me, the car died, stopped, doing anything. So we were examining the car. Now, the car is a radio remote controlled toy car. So the first thing came to my mind, again, Occam's razor. Okay, it's remote controlled. somebody has a remote for it and is playing games with her. Well, her child was not home. The kids were staying with dad at dad's house at the time. Julie was there alone while this was going on. There were two remotes that came with the toy car. Julie had possession of both of the remotes. So I'm thinking, okay, if this really happened the way she's describing, maybe there's a third remote, that we don't know about, or something else is interfering, something that's generating a signal on that same frequency. Maybe somebody's changing the channels on their TV and it's affecting the car. So we're talking to her. I took this photograph on that day. While we're talking to her about it, the car kept energizing and rolling. It kept rolling off the table, powered up and with the wheels moving. And again, we had both remotes at that time. So I'm thinking, okay, something weird's going on. We turned the car upside down so it would stop rolling off the table. But she would, we were interviewing her about it, and the car kept occasionally powering up and the wheels would spin. And I noticed through observation that would happen when Julie would point at or put her hand near the car, as she was describing, what happened. And she would, say, and this car, and then she would, gesture to it with her hand. That's when the car would power up and the wheels would start going. So we're watching that and we're filming this. We had a video camera going. So this is all filmed. John Birkenbush from Vestigia was off to the left of the screen in the kitchen. This is the dining room. And he had a variety of environmental monitoring devices, including an ion detector. And the ion detector was pointing at the dining room. John yelled out, "Hey, every time the car powers up and the wheels start going, we're getting a burst of ions." And I do not recall, and it's not in my case notes, whether this was a burst of negative ions or positive ions. I regret that I can't narrow it down to that degree, but John said there's a burst of ions immediately preceding the motion of the car. There would be an ion burst, which you would detect, and then half a second or a second after that, the car would start moving. So by this time in the during this incident, we had moved the ion detector, that rectangular red object, to the left of the screen. We actually put it directly in front of the car, see what was going on. Again, continuously, when Julie would gesture towards the car would go. So again, I'm thinking, okay, we have both remotes. And maybe there's some kid outside looking through the window, because if there was somebody playing games, they would have to see and know when Julie is gesturing toward the car, or else they would just be randomly activating it. There was no one outside, and all the shades and blinds to all the windows in the kitchen and dining room were closed. So there's no place anybody could have had a visual vantage point to see when she was addressing the car. So again, very, very strange. We started doing experiments. I would say, "Hey, Julie, point to the car and put your hand over it, car would start moving." The radio control functions of this car also include steering. You can make the wheels turn left or right to steer it with the remote control, which we had both. I said, "Julie, tell the car to turn left." Julie would say, "Car, turn left." And again, I had all this on video. I was not able to figure out how to embed any clips of the video into this PowerPoint presentation. But if anyone's really interested, I can provide a copy of the video. Julie would say, "Turn left." The wheels would physically turn left. "Julie, tell the car to turn right." Julie would say, "Car, turn right." Put her hand near it. Never touched it. Never touched the car. The wheels would turn right. One of the most significant cases of apparent psychokinesis that I have ever encountered in my investigative career. Was this classical mind over matter psychokinesis? Was Julie, was her arm and hand generating some sort of bioelectrical, biostatic energy, which was enough to control the car? Whatever the mechanism, we would definitely consider it to be PK because it was her intent. She wanted it to go left, go right. That's what it did. So there was an interplay, at least an interplay between what was going on and Julie. That's Julie. That's one of another investigator I brought on to help me, and that's Julie's mother sitting on the couch on the right. We tried to recreate the cold spots that she said she would have when she was playing tarot cards with Stephanie. So we had them play tarot cards. Never felt any, myself and my investigators, we never felt any cold spots, though Julie and Steph said, hey, it's getting cold here right now. Don't you feel this? We did not feel anything. So if they were feeling cold, apparently it was not a physical drop in temperature in the environment, but it was a subjective sensation that they're experiencing. The device that Gordon is holding in his fingers in front of Julie is a rapid reaction electronic thermometer. We were trying to determine whether or not there was a physical drop in temperature, and there was not. I had been working in the case for about a year, visiting Beacon on a regular basis, interviewing more and more witnesses and people, responding to emergency phone calls from Julie that, this stuff is happening. At the time, I was working as a paid consultant for a U.S. television program called Sightings, which was a weekly TV series, was on the air for several years. It was created by Linda Moulton Howe and Henry Winkler was one of the driving forces between creating it. It was a magazine type program that every week they would investigate a haunting or a poltergeist case, UFO cases, past life cases. I worked with the show for two reasons. One, they had integrity. Unlike today's TV shows, this was a documentary magazine show. They would go out to a case and bring in different experts and equipment and film what happened or what did not happen. There was no staging. My experience, at least, there was no staging, no chills and thrills, fakery. The other reason I worked for them is that they paid me. I talked to Julie about the show because she knew I worked for them. Not on staff. I was a freelance consultant working for them and several other shows at the time, Unsolved Mysteries and a few others. I talked to Julie. I said, look, this show has resources. They can bring in equipment that I do not have access to. They can bring in a couple of professional parapsychologists, perhaps, not just a weekend hobbyist layman like me. Also, Sightings has used different psychics and mediums in the past on certain programs, certain cases, which from my discussions with the production and research staff on the show, they thought were legitimate and actually had abilities. So Julie was all, of course, said, yes, if you get some other people out here to help us get to the bottom of this, and they want to do a TV show about it, that's fine. So Sightings comes in. They let me run the investigation for the 3 days they were there. And they allowed me to pick resources. Who did I want to come out? So I asked, I wanted a professional parapsychologist to come out. This is some of the, so when Sightings got out there, they wired both both Stephanie and Julie's house, basement to attic, all areas with 24-hour infrared surveillance cameras, audio recorders to pick up a sound in both the audible and infrasound and ultrasound spectrums. Both houses were wired for 3 days. I had requested a parapsychologist. They suggested Carrie Gaynor. Carrie's claim to fame. Carrie's worked many poltergeist cases over the years. Carrie may be best known for working alongside Barry Taft on the 1974 Culver City The Entity case. So they flew out Carrie on his dime. I briefed him on the case. So Carrie was there, interviewed the witnesses extensively. From a psychic standpoint, I requested that they get a hold of a guy named Peter James. Peter was a prolific television psychic back in the 90s. And again, this was the October 96, when Sightings came out for 3 days. From what I had seen of Peter, he seemed to be a legitimate psychic medium who could allegedly talk to ghosts. Again, seemed. I watched the show. I worked for the show, but I also watched the show. And yes, he seemed to have abilities. I also am aware that TV shows do edit their footage and can make things seem to be not exactly the way they are. But I talked with the research team and different directors and segment producers who'd worked with Peter James, and they said, "Yep, he's the real deal." They worked with others who were not. They thought that Peter was real. So we went out to pick up Peter at the airport. I went along with the production the segment director, got him at the airport, and I'm starting to casually talk with Peter in the car ride back to the target location. And the director said, "Hey, don't talk to him. Don't tell him anything about the case. He knows nothing about it. I don't want him picking up on anything you say, even if you're not aware you're saying it, that he can extrapolate some details from." Again, a reaction from the production staff, which seemed to indicate some integrity here. So, to the best of my knowledge, and I believed that Peter came in totally cold, knew nothing about the case other than the general location in Dutchess County, New York. The gentleman on the left is Jim Lindsay. Jim Lindsay was the producer for the episode investigation. Jim is a prolific segment producer for paranormal TV programming, or at least used to be, and I've worked with him on a couple of different investigations. He's talking to Carrie. While Carrie was there, there was a print on the wall downstairs on the ground floor, and somebody yelled, "Hey, this picture is rotating on the wall." This is not the picture. I did not get a photograph of that picture. This is a representative photograph askew on the wall from my own home. But everybody's yelling, "Hey, this picture is moving." So Carrie ran over. We have the cameras, video cameras, mine and from the TV show focused on it. And lo and behold, the picture is slowly rotating on the wall. We were all very excited about that initially, but Carrie, his opinion was that there was some sort of vibration that we could not feel, but he felt there was a vibration, maybe from the road, truck going down the road, that was causing this to move. So I took his word for it. However, at around the same time, everybody's attention was focused on that moving print, whatever the cause was. Somebody came running out of the bathroom upstairs, down the stairs in a panic. The sightings have brought in a surveillance equipment company to run and set up all the surveillance gear. The woman on the left, who again was not on camera on part of the show and did not sign any release to the show or to me, so I covered her eyes. But she was in the bathroom doing what you do in a bathroom, and she said there was a print hanging on the wall in the bathroom on a nail, and she watched the print lift up. The wire behind it came off the nail, and the print flew forwards towards her and fell to the ground. Did not just fall straight down the wall, but was lifted up and propelled towards her. She came down screaming about this. This is Peter trying to talk to her about it and calm her down a bit. Again, this was around the exact same time when we were all focused on that other picture moving on the wall. Coincidence? I don't know. But she was legitimately frightened. We did interview her on camera about her experience, but she decided to decline to let it be used on the television show. So I do have to grant her privacy. Because this is in Stephanie's house on the left. This is some of the surveillance footage we were doing overnight one evening. When Peter James, the psychic, arrived, he came into both houses, and he picked up on he said in Julie's house, he felt a deceased person's presence. And he said, young, very young, possibly female. You have a confused, scared little girl going on here. Again, if he truly came in cold and was not primed with this information ahead of time. And I don't think he was, but I will not bet my life on that. That I thought was impressive. When he went across the street to Stephanie's house, he went in and immediately said, "You have a basement here. I need to go to the basement." So we brought him to the basement. He said, "Yep, the source of the haunting is this basement. And what's been impacting all the houses in this neighborhood is this basement." At that time, and not before, to the best of my knowledge, we told him about Amanda supposedly finding a human skeletal hand in the dugout portion of the basement, which had been left in that state for over 10 years after the father abandoned it and left the family. And the family said they didn't go down the basement because they were afraid. There was something, just a frightening presence there. Again, supposedly Peter James did not know that until we told him on that day. He said that this is the source. And tell you something, there is a full human body buried under the concrete in this basement. So we're down there having this discussion with him. Me, and the TV show crew, no one else. The family had left the house. The doors were locked because we did not want anybody coming in and contaminating the investigation while we were running surveillance equipment. So I'm down in the basement with Peter James and the sightings production crew and the audio guy and the video guy. We hear up above us on the ground floor heavy footsteps, like people wearing boots. One or two people, at least one, distinctive sound of loud pounding footsteps running back and forth across the hardwood floor above us. We sent one of the guys to run upstairs to see who had entered the house and which door was unlocked. He goes upstairs, doors are still locked. No one is in the house. While he's upstairs, we still hear the footsteps running back and forth, in addition to hearing him walking around back upstairs. He comes downstairs, no one's here. During the entire time of that, we heard heavy footsteps running back and forth upstairs, which is one of the things that Stephanie had reported in the house, is footsteps walking across in her hardwood floors, but no one was there. We had the house rigged with video and audio surveillance gear in the basement and throughout the house. None of those sounds showed up on the standalone audio or on the audio track of the video surveillance. You hear us saying, "Hey, do you hear those? The footsteps. What's going on up there?" You see the crew member, go upstairs to check it out. And we heard it continuously while we were down in the basement, but nothing is recorded on audio. So we all decided to go back upstairs, and we're at the top of the stairwell, discussing what we had heard and checking some of the recordings, trying to see if we recorded the sound. While we're upstairs at the top of the stairwell, we began to hear footsteps down in the basement, which we had just left. The sound, distinct sound of what to us and me sounded like human footsteps walking across the gravel in the hole in the middle of the basement floor. Crunch, crunch, crunch. So we all are peeking down the stairwell, not running down because we're kind of unnerved at this point. We then hear those footsteps move off the gravel and start walking up the wooden stairs from the basement to where we were standing. Creak, creak, plot, plot. Again, we all agreed it was a sound of footsteps, but there was no one there. So we took a few steps back away from the door opening to the stairwell. Julie, who had, by this time had come over, she was knocking on the door from next door. She was crying in very upset state, saying that she feels something is very angry that we're there. So she's joined us at the top of the stairs. The footsteps are coming up the stairs. And then Julie says, "Oh my God, it's here, it's here. It's walking right by me." Julie has like an involuntary shudder. I have a tri-field meter, a magnetometer, an electrostatic detector. I'm putting it where Julie says that she feels this. The needle started fluctuating, not excessively, not spiking off scale, but it was reacting to something at that exact same spot. Again, can't prove that was anything anomalous or paranormal, but I could not identify any artificial source of electricity or magnetism in that area that would cause that. She said, oh, it's heading to you guys. We heard footsteps walking across towards us on the floor. Jim Lindsay, the segment producer from Sightings, ran up and saying, Randy, what do you have? Cameras, get the cameras running. He ran up directly in the path of where these footsteps were walking. Jim turned as white as forgive me, but as white as a ghost. His entire body shuddered. He turned pale. He had to sit down and start breathing heavily. He said that he felt something pass through his body. He says it was electrically tingling and made him overwhelmingly nauseous. And he was trying to keep from throwing up in front of all of us. By this time, the cameras, the TV show cameras were running. We filmed the reaction that he got and filmed the aftermath and us, trying to talk to him and calm him down. While this is going on, we hear there's another stairwell going up to the second floor of the house around the corner from us. We hear footsteps walking up the wood steps to the second floor of the house. We all noticed it. You hear us on camera saying, oh my God, the steps are going up to the next floor. Again, nothing recorded on the surveillance equipment. And then it faded away. This was a significant event for me and for everyone else who was there present witnessing this. Jim Lindsay, an experienced, actually highly skeptical segment producer specializing in the phenomena, turned physically ill. It was not a feigned reaction, to get points for the TV show. And in fact, even though we filmed this, he declined to let it be used in the show. So if anybody ever saw the show on Sightings back in, I think it aired in 97, 98 it aired. This is an unknown piece of the event. Jim was very severely physically affected. The footsteps faded away, did not repeat itself for the rest of the evening or the next day we were there. Because everybody had heard stuff in the basement, footsteps in the basement on the gravel surface here, heard the footsteps coming up from the basement because of the alleged human hand found there. Peter James saying the source of it is the basement. There's a body there. We talked with Stephanie. Stephanie said, hey, if there's a body there, let's find it and get rid of it and do what has to be done with it. So we hired a demolition crew, brought them in with jackhammers and shovel, and we tore the crap out of that basement. While we were doing other things, this is a photograph of the actual demolition we took. They're digging. While they were digging, and they dug out a lot. The original hole was a lot smaller than that. The work crew leader came to me and said, hey, we can't dig anymore. It is going to damage the structural integrity of the house foundation, and bad things are going to happen. So we stopped the dig, never found any more skeletal remains. I am not 100% convinced that there ever was a skeletal hand there. Again, we're dealing with the report of a 6 to 8 year old girl. No one else saw it except the father, who is no longer in the picture. But something weird was going on connected with this basement. This photograph on the left is Julie the night that all this was happening. The footsteps, Julie showing up terrified that whatever it was is very angry at us. On the right, this is a Ouija board that she had in the house. An original old wooden William Fold Ouija board that she brought over to me and said, here, take this. It's yours now. I don't want this in my house anymore. It scares me. And that's the holy water that she would put in the incense burner. She gave me that too. So anything connected with this, I don't want, take it. I still have both of them. I took this picture last night. And interestingly, from 1997, the bottle still has holy water in it. The night of the last night we were there filming this for Sightings, Julie moved out while the Sightings investigation was going on. She packed up and moved out, moved to another house in Beacon, New York. Stephanie and her family next door moved out a few years after that. Not because, allegedly not because of the haunting, they just wanted to move. Julie, though, I thought was very unnerved about it, but she was planning on moving anyway. She had not just decided while we were there filming that she was going to move out that night. It was planned. What was going on with all this stuff? Both the historical stuff, the activity become physical after Julie moved in, after the road work was beginning. Well, one, there was a pre-existing haunt, whether it was a residual place memory haunting, or whether it was a surviving human consciousness haunting of a little girl's ghost. Something was going on, had been reported since the early 20th century in that neighborhood. It affected multiple houses, multiple generations of witnesses. That does not seem to go along with a place memory haunting, because I think it's too widespread. Unless somebody can cite other cases for me where place memory haunting can wander back and forth between multiple houses on two streets, I think that stretches the model of the place memory haunting. So I think there was a ghost of a little girl, or something that people interpreted as the ghost of a little girl. I believe that when Julie and Steph got involved, their presence and their interaction triggered something and kicked it up a notch. I think they were both recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis agents. There were, for both families, and Julie in particular, they were exhibiting, they were interviewed thoroughly. I had a person with a background in psychology do interviews with both of the two principals. Julie had gone through a divorce. There were custody issues and threats of violence involved with this custody dispute while this physical activity was occurring in the household. Julie, being fed up with men at that time, got involved in the same sex relationship and was having her girlfriend come over to the house. Well, Julie's parents both lived upstairs in that same house, and there were some generational differences in as far as who could accept this relationship going on in the house. Julie was going through a lawsuit against her husband at the time. A lot of stress. Stephanie and her family, similar stress with the divorce situation, which had been resolved many years earlier, but still the family never totally recovered. There are other issues with the daughter, Amanda, which I will not go into for confidentiality reasons, but I thought played into what I interpreted as a perfect storm of RSPK, poltergeist agents, and a multi-focus or multi-agent, at least two, possibly Amanda, Stephanie's child, being involved, triggering this also. So what do we have here? Was this a haunt that shifted or took on the persona of a poltergeist case, perhaps due to some interplay of who I think were RSPK agents? Was there RSPK molding and changing the dynamics of the existing haunt, or was it two separate things? Was there an existing haunt? Was there then a typical Bill Roll type RSPK poltergeist situation that developed because of these families? And it's just coincidental that they were occurring at the same location at the same time. Again, I think more likely that there was interplay. That after all these years, I thought about this case. I've reviewed my case files and documentation and discussed it with many researchers. I think that there was a little girl's ghost. I think it's been there for a long time. I think that the presence of these two families actually interacted with the haunting, and through a combination of a ghost and RSPK, living human generated poltergeist activity, I think there was a perfect storm, a perfect interplay of these two, what we have always imagined to be discrete and separated phenomena. I think this case to me has been strongly suggestive that the lines between a haunting and poltergeist are not as thick as we've always thought, and there is a lot of interplay between the witness, between the haunt, whatever the phenomena is behind the haunting, and the psychology and possibly neurology of the witnesses who experience it. And I think this was just a perfect storm. And I've investigated a number of hauntings and poltergeist cases, and to me, from what I experienced and cannot explain to this day, to me, this is my big one. And maybe next year I'll change my opinion on it, but right now that's what I think. Again, some notes: the poltergeist activity would become more intense when Julie and Stephanie were together. The haunting phenomena appeared to be altered or mediated by the poltergeist activity. And in totality, I think the poltergeist activity exceeded the parameters, again, of the Bill Roll RSPK model. Seemed to involve elements of contagion, poltergeist contagion. I think to this day that something was aware I was going to Julie's house that first day, and something impacted my car to prevent that from happening. I do not believe it's coincidental. I feel like I was targeted. Again, I had not been in contact with Julie other than by the phone at that point. The static and stuff over the phone, that could have been RSPK. She could have been, subconsciously causing interference on the phone because I was on the phone line with her at that moment. Could Julie do that through subconscious RSPK to my car while I'm on the New York Thruway? And I had never had any physical contact with her. Again, I think that stretches the boundaries of what we think RSPK can do. So that's my thought. That's the case. Those are my thoughts on the case. And we have time. I welcome any questions.
Bradley, thank you so much again for another wonderful talk from yourself. Absolutely awe-inspiring. This is my type of haunting that gets everything, all the hairs on the back of your neck standing up. And like you,